I heard your requests. Here is the abridged version of Katniss and Peeta's relationship. Katniss and Peeta grow up in fundamentally different households, and this shapes the way that they deal with later relationships. Katniss grew up in a loving household in the poorest part of the seam, and after her father died, it turned to Katniss in order to keep her family alive. She had to learn how to hunt and how to kill and how to trade in order to feed them. And it's because of this that Katniss starts to view relationships as transactional. She knows that if she kills a squirrel and gives it to the baker, he will give her a slice of bread. Peeta grows up very differently. He was raised in the nicer part of District 12, but in an incredibly abusive household. Both Katniss and Peeta had to take on adult responsibilities when they were children, but whereas Katniss did it because she had no other choice, Peeta was forced into child labour by his mother. And it's because of this that Peeta learns to never expect anything from a good deed. And both of these philosophies are incredibly highlighted when Peeta gives Katniss the bread. Peeta knows that he is going to be punished for this, but he wants to do a good thing anyway. Katniss views this as Peeta saving her life, and she feels that she owes him for this. Katniss and Peeta's relationship is a lot less structured than Katniss and Gale's, but even so, I would call the first book a performance for them. When they go into the first games, Katniss cannot understand Peeta at all. She's in an incredibly foreign environment and her senses are on high alert, and so she is training herself to view everyone as an enemy. When Peeta starts crying at the reaping, she thinks it's maybe a manipulation tactic to get sponsors. When he admits his love for her in the interview, she comes at him because she thinks that he portrayed her as weak. When Peeta joins the career pack in the games and starts hunting Katniss, she assumes that he has turned on her and that he is hunting her and that she needs to kill him first. And although the final one is understandable as to why you would think that, it's not what Peeta's doing at all. We know that Peeta has always been in love with Katniss. We know that he doesn't value himself as a wanted person in the world. Peeta is doing everything he can to get Katniss home. And after Katniss sets loose the Trackerjackers, Peeta comes to her and tells her to run away. And she cannot comprehend why. Katniss fundamentally does not understand a person who is kind for the sake of being kind. And I think things really start to shift in the cave. The moment it's announced that two tributes from the same district can come out alive, Katniss doesn't hesitate in finding Peeta. By this point, Katniss also knows that Peeta is a natural performer. He is very good at putting on a show for the cameras. And Peeta is in desperate need of medicine. And she knows that the best way to do this is to get sponsors. And the best way to get sponsors is to play into the romance that Peeta created. And Katniss will not let Peeta die, whether or not because she thinks she still owes him for the bread, or because she's actually just a good human being who really cares about him. And so she plays up the romance for the cameras, and she acts. And it's important to note the different way that Katniss and Peeta view this situation. Peeta's feelings for Katniss are always at the forefront of who he is as a person. And I don't think that Peeta believed he was going to survive these games, even in that cave. I think he saw those moments with Katniss as a blessing from the universe that he hadn't really ever gotten before. Whereas Katniss is so focused on their soul survival that she doesn't even consider feelings. But I do think that Katniss really does start to care for Peeta a lot. And then the moment with the berries comes. And Katniss could go home. She could win this thing. And she refuses. Before they went into the arena, Katniss and Peeta had a discussion about what they wanted most. And Katniss said that she wanted to keep Prim alive. That was the only thing she could really focus on, was her sister. Whereas Peeta said that he did not want to be made into another part of their games. And it is only at this moment with the berries where Katniss actually understands Peeta. And I think this is really symbolic of Katniss fully understanding Peeta's worldview. And it's especially more prominent in the books because they actually take the berries and put them in their mouths. Katniss is fully ready to die with Peeta as long as it meant that they don't become another part of the games. And then they come out of the arena. And the way each of them readapts to the real world is very different. They have both shared a harrowing, horrible experience together. They both understand each other's trauma. They both understand what the other went through. Peeta wants to remember every moment of it. Katniss wants to forget. And it's here that Katniss reverts back to her old ways in District 12. She still goes hunting despite having more than enough money to cater for her family. She tries to resume a relationship with Gale, but it's forced and stilted. Whereas Peeta quickly knows that the games have changed everything. He moves into the Victor's village without his family, and he starts taking care of Haymitch. But they go on the victory tour, and this is where Katniss and Peeta start to actually become friends with each other. Katniss feels guilty for hurting Peeta in the games, but he sits her down and he tells her that there is nothing to be sorry for, and nothing that she should ever have to apologize for, because she kept them alive. And we move on to the next phase, which I'm calling Keep the Other Alive. Throughout the victory tour, Katniss and Peeta sleep in the same bed quite often because they both suffer from night terrors. And it's only really with Peeta that she can actually sleep a good night. And here's a key difference between how Katniss deals with pain with Gale and Peeta. With Gale, Katniss will always feel the pain. When Gale's whipped, she takes on his pain, and she suffers for him. But with Peeta, it's where Katniss can actually soothe her pain. And she views him as someone comfortable and good and worth saving. And then they go into the 75th Hunger Games, and all they want to do is save the other person. Both Katniss and Peeta value each other's lives so much and their own lives so little that they start fighting against each other to keep the other alive. And I think Peeta still believes that Katniss is acting to keep them alive, but this is no longer an act for Katniss. Because Katniss is very good at showing her love for other people, but very bad at telling it, if that makes sense. And she views Peeta as everything good and kind in the world, and he sees her as everything strong and right. And then Peeta is captured by the Capitol, and Katniss is brought to District 13. And this loss is massive for the both of them. Katniss and Peeta had been using each other to soothe their pain, and now they were separated and neither of them knew what the other was going through. Essentially, all they had were their nightmares. Katniss could assume that Peeta was being tortured by the Capitol. Peeta had no idea where Katniss was or even if she was alive. They lose the ability to soothe pain, and so they feel it greatly. And we can see this when Katniss uses the pearl that Peeta gave her. Its smooth edges helps her ease her tension. And then Peeta is hijacked and he essentially becomes the last thing he wanted, which is a part in their games. And Katniss cannot be around him when this occurs. For her, Peeta was everything good and kind in the world, and Snow took that away because he knew it would hurt Katniss. Katniss is basically drowning in pain and guilt because of this, and it's here that she decides to go and assassinate Snow. And then we reach the final stage, growing back together. What Snow underestimated when hijacking Peeta was that his love for Katniss wasn't based on the good things she did, on the memories that he could twist. He loved Katniss because he just loved her. And his mind is in a constant conflict of having this girl that he knows he loves, but should hate because she does these horrible things. And so he hates her and loves her at the same time. And as they're running through the Capitol and everyone's dying, Katniss still cannot leave Peeta. Because despite Gale describing it in a rather crude way, Katniss does need Peeta to survive. Because for her, Peeta represents the renewal of life and peace and light, and he soothes her pain rather than enhancing it. And for Peeta, this is a child who was unwanted his whole life, and he's got this person who will do everything to go back to him, who wants him more than anyone. And they know and understand each other so well by this point. After Katniss kills Coin, it's Peeta who knows immediately that she is planning on taking her own life, and it's him that stops her. When Katniss loses Prim, she loses the only other person who was able to soothe her pain. Without anyone else at home, she almost loses the will to live. But then Peeta comes home, and the first thing he does is plant Primrose.